Hello and welcome to Bold Business. This is Ros Jones, and today I'm delighted to be joined by blogger and founder of Right For You, Claire Kenny. Hi, Claire.
Hello, Rose. Lovely to be with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me today. Um, and I'm pretty sure that you have moved over today from the West Yorkshire to the North Yorkshire. Is that correct?
Yes, so I normally live in West Yorkshire, but I have decamped to the East Coast for a few days to dog sit, of all things, for my parents.
Brilliant. And are dogs very important in your life?
Yes, I own a greyhound, a
Oh, wow.
rescue greyhound. He's like a horse, he's massive, but very gentle and beautiful. But I've traded him for my parents' completely opposite terrier,
All
who's
right.
very high maintenance compared to the greyhound. But yeah, I love dogs. I do love dogs.
So I think the idea of rescuing a greyhound, I think that's probably links to a lot of your values, Claire. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a very profound way of looking at it. But yeah, 1,000,000%. It's actually more to do with the fact that I've always just been fascinated by greyhounds as a child, particularly. And when I was a child of probably about 7, we looked after my dad's friend's lurcher for about 3 or 4 months. And he was very tall, very skinny, and absolutely charming. And since then, I've loved sight hounds.
Yeah.
And the more I saw, greyhounds around, the more I thought maybe we could adopt one. And in the end, we did. And yeah, I've never looked back. He's wonderful.
Fabulous. And what has that to do with business? Let's seg over to business world, from dogs to business, because you are very much in the communications world, aren't you? And so tell me about your journey. What was a trigger for you to set up your business, Claire?
Okay, so I started out. I had been in the corporate world for most of my 40s. I went into the NHS, having worked in the NHS previously many, many years ago at age 39, and I've just left the NHS to become fully fledged freelance at the age of 48. And throughout that time, I have been, well, I know it's a cliche, but I have been on a bit of a journey where during my 40s, I have become, I would say, probably the happiest version of myself that I've ever been, but that didn't come easily. My marriage ended at age 38. Following that, I had to do a lot of work to find out who I was outside of the marriage. And as part of that, I discovered a love for writing that I've always written for a living. Basically, I've always been in communications, but I set up a blog. I mean, didn't everybody? But during the pandemic, I set up a blog called My 40 Plus Life, and realised, I guess, from that really, it took off and it brought me happiness that I could never have anticipated, and I wanted to extend that, I think, into my working life. So I decided to do some freelance writing. I felt like there was something missing from my life, probably for the first half of my 40s, and I didn't know what it was. And I just set out on this concerted hunt to find out what made me happy. Writing in my private life brought me a lot of joy. And I thought, I wonder if I can, write in my professional life, in addition to my corporate career. Where will it take me? So I started doing that. I guess it was a bit of a side hustle in inverted commas, but actually a few months ago I left my corporate job and I'm now fully fledged freelance copywriter.
Fabulous. Isn't that interesting, though, that, and this is the journey, I guess, that you came to learn, that we think that happiness and what we love to do is just restricted to our private life and is not necessarily what we do in our professional life, and that they have to be different. And I think you just really, you hit the jackpot there, didn't you, really, with that discovery that you can actually earn money doing what gives you joy.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Also, on the kind of grittier, more realistic side of it, I also discovered that blogging doesn't earn you a massive amount of money. It can,
Yeah.
but it's not for me unless you have thousands and thousands of followers. It's not really an enterprise in its own right. It's more of a passion project, I suppose. but yeah, just going back to your point about, happiness doesn't always come in the form of a relationship, for example.
Yeah.
That's another journey I went on, or going on holidays, or it can come in something, that you're good at and that you love to do. But yeah, if you can make money out of that, even better.
Yeah. And I like that. Going back to regardless of business, it's interesting you're saying about happiness doesn't have to revolve around a relationship. If you've been in a relationship with somebody for such a long time, it's inevitable, I guess, that you become very interlinked. And so when they're gone, I guess that must be another question. You have to question who you are and what you are. It's a whole thing about identity quest, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. You regardless of how the marriage ended, yeah, you have to do a lot of work on yourself to rediscover yourself because
Yeah.
you are inevitably a different person if
Yeah.
in a marriage than you are out one.
Yeah. No, sometimes people ask me, because I've been married a long time now, and people say, what's the secret to it? And I do think actually the secret is having like space in your house so that you can be alone.
Yeah,
That's me. And also having separate hobbies that you go off and do by yourself. And I think that's for me is my way of making sure that I know who I am separate from my relationship with my husband. It is
yeah.
interesting, isn't it though? Especially as women, I think that, and if you've got kids as well, that your identity just seems to come bound up with your family.
Yeah, very much so. And I think you women particularly feel a lot of guilt
Yeah.
if they build a life or an identity perhaps away from the home. But yeah, I mean, obviously, motherhood or marriage, being a wife, if you are a wife, runs through your very core,
Yeah.
and it's the most certainly motherhood is the most important
Yeah.
part of who you are. But you are allowed to do other things as well, and I think if you're really intentional about finding out what makes you happy and what you are passionate about, it just pays dividends, whether it's business, or something else.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard work, isn't it, to do this like work on ourselves to figure this stuff out. Some people just resist that, I think, don't they?
It can be
Yeah,
very uncomfortable. Yeah,
yeah,
most
yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
But I got to a point where I got really obsessed with self. Oh my God, how corny does this sound? But I got really obsessed with self work and became, I mean, I have a little sort of belief system now that's all my own that would have made me kind of sneer when I was maybe in my 30s. But I built this kind of way of being when I was feeling pretty low, to be honest, that's just served me so well and helped me build a life where I genuinely get up every morning, of course. I'm only human, but I do get up and think, oh, I'm excited about today. What can I do? And I take joy from things that aren't massively grandiose and just enjoy day to day life.
Yeah, I love that. And so, was there a time of, when you were, you mentioned being low, was there a time that you'd like to share? Because we like to talk about times of adversity that we've worked through. Are you able to share anything like that that's actually helped you get to where you are now?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, obviously, I won't go into a huge amount of detail about my marriage ending, and me and my ex-husband do, have a good relationship now. We both parents to our daughter, so that's not up for question. But what I would say is when the marriage ended, and all the kind of all the chips were down, I realised that I wasn't in a great place financially. I got told I'd been made redundant not that long after the marriage had ended, and I was in rented accommodation. We were trying to sell the marital home, and I was panicking, quite frankly, about my financial circumstances. So being told I was getting made redundant was the icing on a pretty grim cake, to be fair. Um, but what I would say and I was also kind of thinking, will I ever meet anyone again? will I ever be happy? And I was subconsciously attaching a lot of the conditions of happiness to marriage, having a successful marriage, being in a relationship, not being on your own, which was a mistake. I later came to find out. But I suppose when you hit that low point, you are forced to either sink or swim.
Mm.
But also fate intervened as well. So I had to go out and find work. I was at a company that wasn't known for its compassion or its generosity at the time that I got made redundant. Well, I won't name that company. Um,
Feel free.
it wasn't the NHS, obviously, which I later went on to work for. I had to go out and find some more work because I wasn't going to be getting a big redundancy payout or anything like that. And I ended up going to kind of a contract work, freelance work, essentially, which took me into the NHS. That turned my financial circumstances around. I managed to get a really good long-term contract so I could breathe easy from a financial perspective. From there, it was kind of a really nice domino effect. I met a whole new group of friends, had a new social life, was able to join a gym, and I kind of rebuilt my life from there. That was a really nice, positive corner that I turned, but that only lasted so long. Because after the initial sort of buzz of meeting all these new friends, things become normal, don't they? And
Yeah.
they're no longer a novelty.
Yeah.
And I actually realised I was quite lonely. And I remember, and I've told this story before on to my followers on my blog, because that's one of the things I'm really passionate about. I remember my parents coming around, and I was very tearful one weekend. My daughter was at her dad's, so she wasn't around, and I was very tearful, and that was happening more and more often. I was crying all the time, felt very hopeless about a lot of things. And I just remember I didn't quite know what was wrong with me. And I just remember blurting out to my parents, I'm lonely. And that was a real watershed moment because I'd articulated what was wrong and I'd figured out what was wrong. And once I was able to identify it and name it, I could then deal with it or
Yeah.
try to. And that took a lot longer. But that was a
Yeah.
watershed moment
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. How did they respond?
Oh, I mean, my parents are lovely. I'm such a lucky person. They're the best. They were just very compassionate.
Mm.
I think it's something they'd suspected anyway. I'm a coper, so they'd
Yeah.
seen me single parent trying to get good work, worried about money for a while, but not. I don't ask for help. Never ask for help. Certainly not financial help. But I think they'd suspected that it was on the cards for me to have a little bit of a meltdown at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah.
just really supportive, and that remains.
And so, what did you do about to get out of that state of mind after you'd actually realised what it was? You'd named it. How did you overcome it?
Yes. So I've written about this as well and spoke about this in the past on my blog. I set out. Oh, well, at first I assumed I was lonely because I wasn't in a relationship. So I thought, right, I'll try and meet someone. Well, of course, that's not the way to do it, is it? You attract someone to you. You don't
Yeah.
go out and find them. I do firmly believe that now,
Yeah.
especially when you haven't done half the work required to be a complete person.
Yeah.
I mean, God, this poor person, they had the expectations of the world on their shoulders, and I hadn't even met them yet. And I was also a rubbish partner myself. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to be in a relationship. But I thought, right, yeah, it's easy. Obviously, didn't think it was easy, but I think subconsciously I thought I'll go out and I'll meet someone and I'll be in a really happy relationship and it'll be happy ever after. But that wasn't the case. Did online dating for a while. Awful. I mean, I met some nice enough people, but it just didn't work out. It wasn't meant to happen that way.
I guess that might even make you even feel even more lonely.
Yeah, look, it's horrible. I mean, online dating, it's not something I'll ever do again, I don't think. And it makes you feel worse, not better. And it's just a stopgap. I'm not saying other people don't meet nice men through
Yeah.
online dating, but I didn't meet anything that was, lasting or healthy. Um, So to cut a long story very short, I drew a line under that and then thought I need to go on a concerted drive to find out what makes me happy. And it may not, I had to admit this and come to terms with this myself. It may not include being in a relationship.
Yeah.
And it turns out so far it hasn't. I cut everything back to brass tacks, everything, and had to, and I sought the help actually of a kind of a, I don't know what you would call this person. She was almost like a spiritual guru. This sounds really
Ooh,
cheesy.
ooh, now
Um,
I'm interested.
yeah, but started doing things like Reiki, looking into alternative treatments, Reiki. I started reading loads of spiritual books. I met someone at my job who was very spiritual. She introduced me to the law of attraction,
Right.
which is most of your listeners, I'm
Yeah.
sure, will know, involves getting on a high enough vibration or a high enough frequency to attract wonderful things into your life. It's not about what you do, it's about who you are. I think that's very
Yeah.
true. And yeah, I just slowly but surely started to change my belief system and default to gratitude. I was very much in a state of lack when it came to money, when it came to my expectations of anything really. And I just had to work really hard to turn that around. And I remember speaking to this person that I turned to for help, and she did a sort of a Reiki attunement on me,
All right.
and she said, and I just genuinely, a relationship that I'd been in had ended, and I felt so devastated. And she said, "You've got to start being grateful for the smallest things." I said, "I just don't know how to be happy anymore." She said, "Have you had a coffee this morning?" I said, "Yeah." "How did you feel when you had it? Were you thankful? Did you really savor the taste? What did you have for your lunch? What was that like? Could you go for a walk? What was that like?" You need to be grateful for these tiny, tiny, tiny things. And that's where I went from. And it sounds really silly and insignificant, but it worked.
Yeah.
So I started being intentional about noticing all the things I had to be thankful for. Whereas before, I wouldn't have noticed what I had for lunch. I wouldn't have noticed the fact that I live next to a beautiful, beautiful canal that I can walk along, or any of those little things. And now I notice everything. And over time, it added up. And I noticed more about what I had to be thankful for and all my blessings. And it just had this wonderful ripple effect. And I went from that, being thankful for the very small things to building it up a little bit and started searching for the things that made me really happy. Writing was one of them. So I brought more of that into my life. I started my blog and running. I mean, I don't like running, but running was something that made me feel alive. It helped me stay mentally healthy. And I'd put a lot of weight on. I was very, very unhappy and unhealthy about the way I looked and felt. So I started exercising regularly, ended up joining a running club, ripple effects from that, met lots of friends, opened up this whole social scene, a community, and it just went from there.
Yeah. Fabulous. So the secret to happiness then, Claire, is,
Oh gosh, I feel like I'm the Dalai Lama or something.
well, you said it, it's
Um,
just being grateful. Yeah.
yeah, the secret of happiness is default to gratitude.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And as we said earlier, the sort of instant relief, is, I think some of us feel it hard to just sit still with pain, if you like,
Mm.
with feeling lonely or what, or even unwilling to understand or name or accept the feeling. And so we are putting on these plasters, aren't we? Like getting a new mate, if you like, whatever it is that we do. I think it takes a lot of courage actually to go through, to do the work, because this spiritual person was obviously, to my mind, was obviously sent to you for a reason, and for you to help you. Because that's what the thing is, isn't it? The teacher arrives when the student's ready, is what they say. So when you're ready to do the work, the person will arrive to help you. And I think it's just an amazing story that not many of us will give the time or the energy but also be willing to put ourselves through that. I'm going to say pain, but I guess it's a journey of discovery, isn't it?
Yeah, it really was a very profound journey of
Yeah.
discovery. And
Yeah.
I can tell by some of the things you've just said that actually you're quite aligned with my way of thinking, which is nice to know because
Yeah.
I feel like I've just talked for such a long time. And as I was talking, I was thinking, well, Rosie's listeners think I'm absolutely crazy, but I don't think they will, having heard the way you've just framed that.
Well, they might think I'm crazy too, Claire, but that's fine.
Yeah.
It's who knows who's crazy and who's not in this world of ours. But anyway, but thank you for sharing that amazing story. And now I'd like you to, can you share where people can find your blog? Because I'm sure people want to read more about what you've got to say.
Yeah, the main place you can find my writing and my observations and videos is on Instagram. So it's my40pluslife.me. That's my handle.
My 40 plus life plus my 40 plus life dot me. Okay, that's
Yeah,
where you
and
go.
also on Facebook as well, but
Yeah,
that's just my 40 plus life on Facebook. But yeah, Instagram's the main place to find my musings.
fabulous. Thank you so much. Can't thank you enough. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.